The basic 5 lessons I'm going to talk to you about today is that your heart has to be in it. The how doesn't matter. Work-life balance is fucking hard. Sometimes things just work. And finally, hey guys, welcome back to Mimir. Today, as the title suggests, we are doing a solo episode. In case you missed it, Mimir turned 1 just last month, and I cannot believe that I've been doing this for a whole year. Let me first say thank you so much to each and every single one of you who has tuned in every week, listened to one episode one time, or maybe you're just tuning in today for the first time. Every listen genuinely means something to me, and I know people say that all the time. They're like, oh my god, I wouldn't be able to do this without you, but like genuinely, I'm so thankful for each and every one of your listens. Like, I have said on the podcast so many times that my greatest hope for these episodes is that they reach the people that need to hear them. So even if you tuned in just once, I hope it was a meaningful one time, because that's enough for me. Like, that's great. I absolutely love what I do as the host of this podcast. There's truly like no other podcast that I could ever host. I mean, maybe like a nonsense, silly podcast with my friend Faith, because I feel like that would probably be really fun. But like, genuinely, this is my passion project. I feel so grateful that every week I get to sit down with someone new, learn something new, and share it with the people that really need to hear it. So as I sort of reflect back on where I started, a year ago feels like eons have passed, despite the fact that it's obviously like a relatively short amount of time. I remember vividly being unemployed, sitting in my apartment in SF that I sure as shit could not afford, grinding as hard as I humanly could in between dog walks and cat drop-ins to try and build this podcast. Flash forward today, 51 episodes later, almost 1,000 plays across platforms, and a growing community of over 1,000 listeners. I'm proud. Like, genuinely, I feel very proud of this podcast. I'm proud of what it stands for. I'm proud of the episodes that we've produced. And when I was building this a year ago, this is a funny story, I wrote my absolute pipe dream on a sticky note and put it on my whiteboard so I would see it every day and be reminded of what I was working towards. And one of those goals was that I would go from 0 to 100,000 followers, paying my rent, having subscribers to the podcast. And I traveled to Japan right when I kicked off Mimir, and I bought one of those little, I don't know what they're called, they're like little charms from the temples, and this one was basically like, oh, all your dreams will come true. And I wore that until it fell off of my keychain, naturally, and then I put that on my whiteboard on top of the sticky note to try and give it a boost of power or something. But I just believed that if I worked hard, I could do anything. But obviously we're not there yet. A year has passed and none of those numbers have been hit. And I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit embarrassed by some of those numbers. But what I'm learning is that it's a work in progress to release ego and to not feel some diminished sense of value based off of the numbers. Let's be real, I'm a human being, and of course I feel some type of way about that. But in classic universe fashion, I guess my dreams still came true, just not in the way that I imagined. So what I want to talk about today is really just along the vein of work in progress. I want to share with you guys the top 5 lessons I've learned over this past year from podcasting and from business. The basic 5 lessons I'm going to talk to you about today is that your heart has to be in it. The how doesn't matter. It's all about consistent, honest effort. Work-life balance is fucking hard. And sometimes things just work, sometimes they don't. And then finally, learn how to say no. So let's dive in. Your heart has to be in it. When I started this podcast, it was because I wanted to help people and myself. The idea was pure. It's still my goal to help people realize their own potential and empower them to take matters into their own hands. I truly believe in a future of work where we aren't just doing jobs anymore, but we're all driven by a sense of fulfillment from our work. Imagine it. Imagine a world where we all are driven by a sense of purposeness. How much more joy would the world be filled with? And the image of that better world is genuinely what drives me. And that's kind of why this is a little bit exciting. Like, I've sort of sneakily talked about it on the podcast before that I have a business partner, that we're launching a tech platform. I think come this year, I'll do like a whole other episode about that, like what the idea really is, how it got started. I'll have my business partner on as a guest. I think that would be really fun, but it's kind of like, yes, my dreams are coming true in a very exciting way, in just the way that I didn't anticipate how. So anyway, the point of what I'm trying to say is that you should find whatever that equivalent is to you, because that's what should drive you when it comes to business. Like, if you're going to do a business or a podcast, being driven by empty things like money or fame will lead you down a never-ending path, driven by a hunger that can never be satiated. And like, we all know this logically. I'm sure you guys are nodding your head being like, yeah, of course, you should have, higher purpose drive you, or that, it can't just be money that drives you. What I found is that this is a lot easier said than done. Personally, I struggle a lot with ego. I think as a kid, it was all I knew in terms of how to feel validation. So a while ago, like a few months ago, I found myself having to confront the fact that I had lost myself somewhere along the year. I had lost myself in the pursuit of being known for my podcast. Like, yes, I have an admirable reason for podcasting, but somewhere down the line, I think I was chasing the desire to be well known and almost like famous for the podcast. The reason I think I sort of got lost along the way is because I felt that the only way that I could call the podcast successful was that if it was well known and that I could be recognized for the hard work that I was doing. Because like, when you think about it, like, only really famous podcasts get picked up by networks, and that's how you get sponsorship, and like, that's how you make money, and that's how you make this a real business. And like, I think I had just gotten lost in that thought process. But a good friend of mine, and now my business partner, said something that really stuck with me. He said that some people are known and some people make an impact, and that I was the latter. And I sort of had to take a hard look in the mirror and accept that I might not ever be known for the podcast, but that my podcast would really help people nonetheless. So at first, those things, like I said, felt like they couldn't exist at the same time, because how do you help people if it's not well known or reaching a larger audience? But essentially, the answer comes down to redefining what success means to me, and if your heart is really in your business or if it's your ego that's driving. It did suck to hear at the time, for sure, but it was definitely the tea. And this seems like an amorphous learning lesson, especially for the first of the podcast that I'm going through. And it kind of is, and it's one that I'm still learning. So like, maybe this analogy will help clarify, and it's going to be kind of a weird one, but stick with me. If anybody knows cars, I feel like ego is NOS. It's like a push button, one-time boost that doesn't last. But having your heart in the project is like the engine. It's what powers you. It's what keeps you going. Without the engine, you wouldn't be able to get anywhere. So my advice / learning lesson is that your heart has to be in it for you to stick with it and really build something, whether that's business, but I think this especially applies for podcasting. It can feel really unrewarding in the beginning because there aren't a lot of tangible results. Like, no one is sending you messages telling you that that episode changed their life. At least with business, you see sales, but with podcasting, especially at the stage that I'm at now, you're kind of just throwing this shit out there, hoping it finds the right folks and hits how and when it needs to. So it can feel hard to like let it, like, if it can feel hard to make it that it seems challenging to accept that it's successful because there's no like tangible things associated with it, but you kind of just have to redefine what your version of success looks like. And this kind of takes me into the next lesson, which is that the how doesn't matter. It's really about consistent, honest effort. One of the most fascinating things to me about entrepreneurship is that there's no right one way to do things. Like, you'll hear a lot of business owners say that there's no blueprint for this, there's no roadmap. And I think a lot of people will find this notion stressful. There's a lot of tips, a lot of information online, but there's nothing concrete. There's no perfect how-to for starting a business, which seems insane, but I think this is why I'm so interested in it. Like, when you think about it, I think this can come down to the fact that every founder is different. And that uniqueness is really the coolest thing to me, because it means that we don't all have to do things the same way. And like, thinking about it, part of the reason we all branch out and do our own thing is because what worked for others just simply doesn't work for us. And there's so much freedom in entrepreneurialism, and the how it gets built is really like no different. I just like, how sick is that? Genuinely. Like, it's the wild, wild west out here. We're all cowboys trying to find our way in this entrepreneurialism world. And it makes me a little bit emotional thinking about it because it's just so unlike any other path, and it's so beautiful, and it's genuine uniqueness and freedom. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is like, there's no one right way to do things, which kind of means that like the how it gets built almost doesn't matter. What does matter is consistent effort over time. And I hear this time and time again from other founders, that business gets built one step at a time, one phone call at a time, one mistake at a time, one customer at a time, one day at a time. And frankly, if you don't think about the business like this, it can be really almost overwhelming and demoralizing because you have so much shit to do and you don't even know how to start it, and you don't know if what you're doing is right. And so if you don't think about it as like one step at a time, I think a lot of people quit probably because it's hella stressful to think about it like that. But simultaneously, hyperfixating on the small stuff can be a double-edged sword. Like, I think this is how I personally got lost in my own sauce. I was focusing on the wrong things, thinking they were the right things. But this is why being a CEO is a hard job, and it's not a job that everybody can do, because we're constantly riding the line between vision and execution. So without the ability to zoom in and out constantly, you can really get lost. If you don't zoom in, you make mistakes, and if you don't zoom out, you get lost in the weeds. It's a practice. But nonetheless, the actual building of a business doesn't happen overnight like Instagram makes you believe. It's like my dad used to ask me, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. The matter of consistency comes from making sure that your heart is in it, and great time management. I think it's like that combo, and this is why the transition made sense for me between like your heart has to be in it and it's about consistent effort over time. If you guys want more tips about this, check out my other solo episode on time management, or feel free to ask specific questions in the reviews or comments, and I would be more than happy to answer them at the end of the regular episodes, or I could do another solo episodes, like whatever. I just ask, I'll answer. Okay. This takes me to learning lesson number 3. Work-life balance is fucking hard. I've always prided myself on time management. Like, I've always been the girl that could do it all. I wrote my first book with a full-time course load in college and a part-time job. I wrote my second book while working full-time and getting my master's. I currently work full-time, have the podcast, and I'm working on the startup at the same time. So a while ago, I posted on Instagram looking for solo episode topics, and a lot of you guys had a question about how to maintain a healthy work-life balance. And my first reaction to that was really that it was just a matter of time management. But last week I got really, really sick, like more sick than I've been in literally years. Like, I truly haven't been that ill in such a long time. And I had a lot of time to reflect, and I realized that I really had been burning myself out and I didn't even notice. I think it's because like, I think I can handle a lot, and I've proved that to myself over and over again throughout my life. But I think the important learning lesson here is that like, I don't have to do that. I don't have to burn out both ends of the candle just to like, for what? Like, yes, I'm building something very important, and it does take a lot of hard work and it is a lot of time, but I think it's more or less like reevaluating priorities. And my friend said something interesting that really helped this concept sink in for me. He works with machines, and those machines operate at 10 to 20% of their operating limit exclusively. Like, when you think about it, machines don't operate at their limit all the time. You're not driving with your foot to the floor and maxing out RPMs all the time. Like, otherwise your machines, your cars would just break immediately. And I wasn't applying that concept to myself. I was trying to operate at my limit for months, and this is not sustainable, nor is it very fun. And I think this is an important lesson that all entrepreneurs need to hear. And like, I don't know, to be asked how to maintain a healthy work-life balance, like I thought I had the answers, but honestly, it's really hard to find this balance when you're building a business and you have a full-time job. And so the long and short of it is, honestly, I'm not sure I have great advice on this. I think the conclusion that I came to was that I had to just reevaluate my priorities, looking at all the things that are going on in my life, understanding what fills my cup versus what drains it, and then putting my energy there accordingly. Like, I love my 9 to 5, but it's not what fills my cup, it's what fills my bank account. And I need to find a better way to have a better balance and allow myself to have creative energy for the podcast and for the business, which is my future. So, you know, how do you have a great work-life balance? Like, fuck, I don't know. I'm still figuring it out myself, but at least this is sort of the conclusion that I came to. And I think this also answer probably depends on the kind of life that you want to have. Like, I personally think life is supposed to be slow. When you think about the fact that genetically we have like 120 years max on this planet, it makes me want to savor every single day. Like, not race through my work day so I can leave the office and go to the gym and come home and watch TV. Like, life is meant to be enjoyed. And so you need to find balance and like really focus and prioritize the things that bring you joy and just simply do that. Like, don't make excuses about why you can't find time to do something. Yes, there are tools to help you plan and maximize your days and time, but it's more about priorities. So like, life is meant to be enjoyed. You should just enjoy it and do the things that you're meant to enjoy. And typically success follows when you follow that pattern. Right. Lesson number 4 is that sometimes things just work and sometimes they don't. I have tried a lot of things in my life hoping they'd be my thing, that they would like work, quote unquote. I've tried being an influencer. I've tried being an author. I've tried being a corporate girly. I've tried being a business owner and now trying a podcast. And like, every time something didn't work, I would feel a sense of failure and shame. Like it was my fault that I wasn't good enough or I didn't try hard enough. But honestly, I'm learning that like with business, sometimes things work and sometimes things don't, and you have to try everything. And sometimes it's like a little bit of luck and it's timing. And it's like all of these nuances that are out of control also control the success of your business. So you have to try everything because sometimes things work or sometimes they don't. I mean, think about it. Like, how many successful entrepreneurs didn't find success until their third, fourth, fifth business idea? Life for me is made up of trying different shit to see what sticks, but what matters is that you try, and you have to be okay with that process. It's like shopping. Like, you grab a bunch of stuff and you try it on until you find the dress that fits. And just because one didn't fit doesn't mean that you won't find the right one. You just have to keep trying. I always found it insane that in college they ask you for your first year to pick a major. Some of us are lucky to know our life purpose early, but I personally was not that way, and I don't think a lot of kids are that lucky. And I always learned by trying and finding what didn't work so that could lead me to the right idea at the right time. So sometimes your business idea is great, but the time isn't right. Or sometimes the time is right, but it's the wrong idea. And sometimes it's fucking luck that gets you to the right place at the right time. And life is just a wave that we're all riding, and we don't really have a lot of control of that at the end of the day. So you kind of have to go with it and like let things flow naturally. So my advice, my learning lesson from this year is like, don't cling. If something's not working, let it go. And if it is working, ride the wave, but maintain a sense of open-mindedness. Like, what's working right now might not work tomorrow, and you never know what's around the corner. So as business owners, love your ideas, nurture them, feed them, but don't get too attached. Just go until you can't go anymore and then move on to the next. Like, it sounds cutthroat, but that's just the tea. This brings me to my last learning lesson. The biggest, probably, learning lesson that I have learned and am still learning is that saying no is the best thing you can do for your business and for yourself as the business owner. I find that I'm constantly confronted with this challenge as a podcaster. Like, I obviously get people requesting to be guests on the podcast all the time. And in these scenarios, I really have to rely on my instincts as the host and my intuition as a business owner. Like, is this person the right choice? Will they help my listeners? Are they going to be a good guest? Will something happen and cause drama? Like, these are all questions that I'm constantly having to ask myself, and I can't always rely on logic to help me with this, but I just kind of have to trust my intuition. And at the beginning of the podcast, like a year ago, of course I said yes to everyone. I was still trying to build a decent backlog of episodes to build credibility, develop consistency, but here I am now a year later, and I'm finding that it's almost better to say no more than I say yes. And this is because it's my responsibility as the host and the founder to provide the best content possible for this platform. And not everyone that slides into my email inbox is going to be the right choice. Typically, I know almost immediately if they're going to be the right fit for the podcast, but the hard part is saying no when it isn't. I personally am not great with confrontation. So like, this part is hard for me, and I'm not kidding you guys. It's every fucking time. to have to say no is hard. It has not gotten easier for me. I guess that's not true. Maybe it has gotten like a little bit easier, but it's still hard. I do screening calls before I book episodes for obvious reasons, and I always preface them by saying that the purpose of these calls is to ensure that the podcast is a good fit for both me and the guest. I mean, I've never had someone come on these calls, learn what the podcast is about, and then change their mind about wanting to be a guest, but I would totally respect that if it didn't align with their goals or values. So like, although on the flip side, like the hard part for me is how do I say when it's not a good fit for the podcast? I've had to get really creative over the last year on ways to say no thank you because like I think I'm just a little bit scared. Everything from every excuse under the book, from like, oh, let's circle back at a later date, to like, I'll email you a follow-up link and then they never hear from me again. And saying this out loud, I realize that this is a very cowardly thing to do. Like I really should just grow a pair, come out and say, thank you so much for your time and interest, but I don't think you're going to be the right fit for the podcast. But of course, I'm scared that they're going to ask why, and then I'll have to say that the vibe isn't right, or that I don't think that their business is the right fit. And I'm also afraid of hurting their feelings, which isn't really my responsibility, especially like if I'm, kind. But tell all this to my heart rate every time it happens. It's like right skyrocketing through the roof. So anyway, like sometimes I feel like I just ramble on these solo episodes, and I really hope that you guys are just sticking with me and like understanding what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say here is that I'm still learning how to say no politely but firmly. I will say, however, that every time I do say no, I am very grateful for it. Like I've absolutely ignored my intuition before and regretted it during the interview. And then I will have just wasted my time and their time because I'm obviously not going to put my name on what I would consider to be a subpar episode for you guys. And I shouldn't let my own cowardice affect your listening experience. Actually, like, frankly, having written this out and saying it out loud is really helpful advice for me because I think it's helping me gain confidence and realize that I'm just being a coward. Just need to like, it's not that serious, like this is my job and not everyone's going to be a good fit. I think that people understand that. And this is more of a me problem than anything else. So I'll figure it out. So, check back in a year when I do this again and see how this is going. But overall, like being a business owner of any kind is just a really big learning lesson. We realize things about ourselves that we wouldn't if we didn't go down this path, and we're constantly being asked to grow past our own limits for the purpose of almost like fulfilling our own purpose. Something greater drives us all, and we can't let our own bullshit get in the way of that. I am incredibly grateful for this journey, and now this little tradition of doing a solo episode every single year of podcasting to share with you guys what I've learned over the past year. Thank you so much for listening to this episode and every other episode you've ever listened to. I would say that I couldn't do this without you, but I would still be doing this even if nobody listened. And frankly, I did do it when nobody was listening a year ago. So I think I should say thank you for the opportunity and for this platform to be able to share wisdom. In case you didn't know that, but that's everything that Mimir stands for. And this is technically supposed to be the outro of the episode, but I kind of want to share where the name Mimir comes from since it's my fucking show and I can stop the outro halfway to tell you guys a little bit about some Norse mythology. But I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast before. And I think it would be helpful for people to understand. And also just, I think it's dope. So Mimir was a Norse god who guarded the well of knowledge that lay at the base of the world tree. And this well is the place where Odin tortured himself for like, I don't remember how many days, but it was like 9 days and 9 nights or something like that. Anyway, eventually he gave his eye so he could pull runes from the well. And the runes actually went on to become the foundation for the Norse language. And like back in the day, it was also used for like magical purposes. But the point is that Mimir's well is a place where knowledge lived. And that's what I wanted to create, a place where aspiring entrepreneurs could come and pick knowledge from the well that they could use to create their dream lives. So anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. This is the outro for real this time. I hope you found this helpful. I had a lot of fun creating this episode and reflecting back on the past year of podcasting, which feels like decades ago, but somehow also feels like no time at all. I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate your time and your ears once a week. And it's truly my pleasure and my honor to be the host of this podcast. So I hope you guys found this helpful, and I will see you guys next week.